Rorschach's Journal, October the 12th, 1985. Dog carcass in alley this morning. Tire tread on burst stomach. This city is afraid of me. I have seen its true face. The streets are extended gutters, and the gutters are full of blood, and when the drains finally scab over, all the vermin will drown. The accumulated filth of all their sex and murder will foam up about their waist, and all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, "Save us." And I'll look down and whisper, "No."
Rising anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe has voted English-only sign. 40,000 tons of armed with PCBs blew up the ozone layer today.
Standing by for solid rocket booster separation.
Greetings, prisoners of gravity. This is Commander Rick, gazing and grazing up and down the TV dial. On Monday, I caught an old Superman episode, and it was so naive. When they said, "Look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane," I thought, no, it's a hole in the ozone layer. There are no real superheroes. And if there were, would they be like Superman? As morally upright as a minister, as impartial as a judge, an all-American patriot? Or like Batman, a crusader for truth, wealthy enough to pay for his gadgets? Or would real superheroes be as pure and morally upright as Reverend Jimmy Swaggart, as impartial as Judge Thomas, as patriotic as Ollie North, a crusader like Geraldo, wealthy like Donald Trump? What type of person would enjoy undressing in phone booths? Think about it. Would you be happy if vigilantes in spandex zoomed around the streets in heavily armed hot rods and homemade jets, totally unsupervised by police commissions or civilian review boards? What would be the reality of superheroes? The answer is Watchmen. Watchmen is a comic. It ran 12 issues, 32 pages an issue. Writer Alan Moore and artist Dave Gibbons juxtaposed 1985 America and the comic concept of superheroes. But comparing Watchmen to the average superhero comic is like comparing Citizen Kane to Pretty Woman. Since it was published in 1986, I've become more and more convinced Watchmen is simply the best superhero comic ever. Alan Moore was already a legend in the comic world for his work on V for Vendetta and Swamp Thing. Dave Gibbons was known for his artwork on Road Trooper and Green Lantern. Together, Dave and Alan had created a short time travel story called Chrono Cops and a superb Superman annual. Watchmen opens with the world on the brink of war. Superheroes are outlawed, and an unknown assassin starts bumping them off. The story jumps from Manhattan to Mars, interweaving a global conspiracy with the intimate lives of a dozen distinct characters. And what compelling characters they are. Disturbed, lonely, outcast, vain, shy, abused. This week I talked with Alan and Dave, and from that Nancy has assembled this documentary. If you've read Watchmen, here's the story behind the story. If you haven't, prepare to have your preconceptions about comic books blown away. Roll it, Nancy. Alan, what themes did you want to explore with Watchmen?
Originally, there weren't really any themes. It was an idea for a more interesting than usual superhero book. Me and Dave Gibbons thought we'd like to work together, and we thought we'd probably end up doing a superhero book because it was doing it for DC and they do very little else. We discussed what sort of superhero book we could do. Originally, we were talking about nothing more important or serious than superheroes themselves, which don't have very much relevance to the real world. But we wanted to comment upon some of the traditions of the superhero book. That was more or less all we wanted to do, a revisionist superhero book.
Sorry to interrupt already, but I'd better introduce the cast of Watchmen. Dan Dryberg, a lonely kid who idolized a superhero named Night Owl. He grew up to be the new Night Owl and never really grew up. Rorschach, abused son of a prostitute, battles crime with a psychopathic rage. The comedian, machine gun-toting, right-wing super patriot, brutally murdered on page 1 of issue 1. Silk Spectre, pushed into crime fighting by her mom, a brassy dame who was the original Silk Spectre. Ozymandias, so smart he retired and became billionaire Adrian Veidt. Dr. Manhattan, the only Watchman with real superpowers. God exists, and he's an American. 6 lives, tied together by fate, love, paranoia, and fear. Dave, where did the idea for the various characters in Watchmen originate?
The Watchmen was originally going to be a revamping of the Charlton characters, who were a group of characters published by a rather small-scale publisher, nothing on the size of DC or Marvel. DC had acquired the rights to the characters, and like all these sort of slightly clunky second-rate characters, you know, Alan and I both thought there was a lot of charm in doing something with them. And Alan came up with an idea that would use them, actually use them up, you know, because certain of them would die and wouldn't be available for sequels and things like that. DC rather balked at this prospect and said, well, could you come up with some more characters? And when we looked into that, it became clear that the characters did fall into certain archetypes, that there was the Superman, the only Superman in our world, Dr. Manhattan. There was the Batman, Green Hornet kind of figure who had a secret cave and a special ship, an owl ship that he could fly around in. There was the detective, there was the kind of down-at-heel Sam Spade character, carried rather to an extreme. And we discovered that what we actually had were archetypes that we could in fact explore the whole superhero mythos with.
The title Watchmen, like almost every aspect of the book, functions on a lot of different levels, but where did the name actually come from?
The origin of that is, I think it was a Roman writer called Juvenal who said, I think it was when the Roman army was going to be away from Rome, the Roman soldiers said, well, what about our wives? And they said, oh, well, we'll get watchmen to watch them. And the question was, well, okay, but who watches the Watchmen? And in a way, not in a way, really, in our book, the rest of humanity is suspicious and despises these overbeings because they're frightened of what they can do. They don't like their secrecy. We show that indeed superheroes have, as it were, been banned by a Senate hearing, you know, that we don't want these masked vigilantes. They've been driven underground. So, again, it's a slight twist because usually in comic books, the heroes are applauded by the general public. They're the saviours of the general public. But we thought, well, maybe they wouldn't be. They'd be sort of admired, but probably feared.
What started to happen was that around about issue 3, we started to notice that because of the way in which we were telling the story, that there were all sorts of other things, unexpected things, happening within the work. There were certain political themes becoming apparent. More importantly, from my point of view, there were certain technical and stylistic things which were emerging. The way that we could almost cram subliminal information into the background of the panels by ways of little symbols and signs, just because Dave is an artist with the capacity to work in all of that detail clearly and legibly. And we found that somehow in that, the comics language, at least as I understood it, seemed to be evolving with each issue that we were doing. We were sensing new possibilities.
Really, the question that is posed by Watchmen is who makes the world? You know, who is responsible for the way the world is? And a lot of it is planning, but a lot of it is just sheer chance. There are patterns within this, the pattern that we perceive, but there are patterns going on underneath it, and that's what we tried to show with these almost subliminal patterns that go through things, echoes, repeated shapes, motifs turning up in unexpected places. I mean, the smiley face, I tried not to do it to the point of becoming facetious with drawing smiley faces, but there were things, for instance, we had these hydrants on the corner of the street that were things that you would plug your electric car into. So they had like a socket with two pinholes in it. And I must have drawn 100 of these until I suddenly realised that this circular depression with these 2 slits in it and the thickness of the depression was another smiley face.